good to be here this morning, and it is really good because it is September. It is September, and for those of you that don't really know what that means, is college football is finally here. I'm seeing some people cheer, some people excited, but I love football because I think one of the main things that I like about football is that I get to reminisce on my glory days, because that's what I played in high school. You see, I'm always watching ESPN. If it's to watching some basketball, to watching some baseball, to watching some spike ball, it's a newer sport, or some pickleball, or tennis. You know, they have all these different sports, but I'm really only watching those different sports because football wasn't on. 2 weeks ago, I caught myself watching high school football because college football wasn't on yet. And so just this weekend, I was in Tennessee, go Big Orange, and I got to see my Vols get a huge win. And so I'm for all the Vols fans out there, go Big Orange. But there's one thing that I like really more about professional sports than college sports. And what that is fantasy football. Fantasy football. For those of you that are confused, fantasy football, imagine you are getting to manage your own football team. And so you're playing a virtual game where you get to be the head coach. That's right, you get to draft your own players, you get to get your own strategies, and you get to be in control. But there's a catch. You see, you're going against your friends. You're going against, people also who are trying to get those players. Those are also having strategies to make a good team and stuff. And although that aspect is fun, there's an aspect that, while we get to control our team, sometimes things just happen in life. Kevin was talking about circumstances. In fantasy football, you're not actually the coach. I'm not actually on the field when the players are playing, and sometimes players get hurt. So maybe you have a player who's on the team who is projected to play really good this season, but he ends up getting an injury and gets hurt in the very beginning and does not play anymore. Or say you have a player who is not playing well at all. And so you say, you know what, I'm going to put you on the bench. I'm going to put you on my make-believe bench, and you're going to think about your actions. But he goes out there and he plays a real game, and he has the best game of his entire career. So you end up not even getting the points because he's on your bench. And the thing is, we like to be in control. There's an aspect about fantasy football that we like because we get to control our team. But the truth is, if they get injured, or you put them on the bench, or they don't play well, can we control that? Well, that's an easy answer. The answer is no. Just a few years ago, I got the opportunity to draft high. So I got like the first or second pick, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna pick this guy. His name is Le'Veon Bell. Yeah, I'm a big Steelers fan for any sport fans out there. And at that time, the team we had the Killer Bees. The Killer Bees. We had Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell. They were a good trio together, and they were projected to have a good season. But in that season, Le'Veon Bell decided, I'm not going to play the entire season, which ended up my team falling apart, and which led to my team not making it to the Super Bowl, which led to me crying a lot. I'm just kidding, I didn't cry. But the question, we ask about control is who really is in control? That might be a question we ask ourselves in life. And the hard thing to get behind is that we're not in control. You can manage your time, and you can choose what you want to eat, and you can choose your friends, and you can choose what to watch on TV, but you're not actually in control. I'm not saying that you don't have a free will, because I truly believe that the choices that you make you into you. But there's circumstances in life that we truly cannot control. I mean, consider this. A businessman who plans every little detail about his new business. He makes it, he gets all the money right in order and everything, but then the economy crashes. The economy crashes and his business tanks. He had no idea that the economy was going to crash. Or think about a healthy person. There's a healthy person who they exercise daily, they eat right, and the next thing you know, they get a sickness that came upon them that they had no idea that they were going to get, and it came out of nowhere. You see, there's natural disasters. We have earthquakes. We have hurricanes. We have wildfires. We think about Hawaii and all that they're going through. And the sad thing with it is it's not abnormal. These are things that happen throughout life. And they're just part of us and the unknown. And so I say again, you are not in control. Again, you have a free will, but you're not in control. It seems that there's a higher purpose, someone in front of us that's orchestrating events in ways that we can't always see or understand. And that person that I believe all of us know is God. God is sovereign. God is sovereign. And today we are going to look at the life of someone who has the biblical equivalent of a soap opera. And his name is Joseph. His name is Joseph in his life. And throughout his entire life, we see God's sovereignty playing. So let me tell you about Joseph. He was a dreamy kid, pun intended, who got a fancy coat from dad, made his siblings super jealous, and ended up in a bit of a pity situation. Talk about some family drama. Then, as if it wasn't enough, he was falsely accused because apparently he was too handsome for his own good. But wait, he ends up in prison. And then he's right next to Pharaoh as his right-hand man. And then he meets his brothers again who are super jealous of him. And so there's one aspect about Joseph's life that remains consistent. And what that is God's sovereignty. God's sovereignty. God's sovereignty can be a hard thing for us to grasp sometimes. It can be a hard thing to maybe to define in our own words. And so I want to do it by telling you an illustration. So imagine we're all kids here, and we're going to the beach tomorrow. And we tell our guardians, we tell our parents, I want to build a sandcastle. I want to build this nice sandcastle. Mom, can you please take me to the store? Okay. So you get you a toy bucket, you get you a toy shovel, and when you get home, you say, all right, you know what else? I'm going to write it out. I'm going to write out how I want my sandcastle to look. And you start writing it all out, and the day comes, and you are finally at the beach. And you are so excited. You're just like, yes, you got the spot that you're going to be at. You start building it. You get your shovel. You start putting in the bucket. You start making everything. You are so excited about the sandcastle. And then you start building it, and a huge wind gust comes through. A huge wind gust comes through and tears a little bit of your sandcastle apart. And then you start realizing, oh man, I actually made my sandcastle a little too close to the water. So now a tide comes and washes it up a little bit. And then with the icing on top of the cake, some children run by. Some other children run by and accidentally step on your sandcastle. You see, you had a choice. You got the bucket, you got the shovel, and you wrote out your plan. But the things that you didn't control was like the wind, the water, the kids. You see, that is all part of God's sovereignty. That is all part of God's sovereignty. Did you guys control that? Did we control that? No, we did not. You see, God's sovereignty can be defined as his absolute authority and control and rule over all of creation. His absolute authority, control, and rule over all of creation. That means that God is the supreme being. He's the creator of the universe. He has the right, the power, and the authority to do all things according to his good will and purpose. And sometimes we get a little, when we hear about God's sovereignty, we think, no, what about my free will? And the truth is, they go hand in hand. They go hand in hand. Because let's say you are, I'm going to go on a run tomorrow. I'm going to wake up early and I'm going to go on a run. And you wake up early and you start going on your run. And you're running. And next thing you know, you see Bob. Hey, Bob, I haven't seen you. Next thing happens is you're at Awaken Coffee with Bob. Well, you did go on your run, but you didn't plan to be at Awaken Coffee. And that's all part of God's sovereignty. It's a part of his plan that he truly knows, and we can see it throughout the entire scriptures. I want you to think about it like this. We make the choices, but God writes the story. We make the choices, but God writes the story. In Romans 8:28, it says, and we know all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have called according to his purpose. You see, the scripture highlights his sovereignty. It says for the ultimate good, all the things that happen, it's because of his sovereignty. When we look at Proverbs 19:21, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. Right there, it talks about how we do have a free will. And we have thoughts, but God's ultimate purpose is the one that prevails. Isaiah 46:9-10. Remember the former things, those long ago. I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. God's purpose stands. God is sovereign. We make the choices, but God writes the story. We choose our path, but God guides our journey. Our life, it might be a canvas, but our God is the one guiding our hand. And we're going to see this throughout Joseph's story. And so we're going to start with Joseph's betrayal. Joseph's betrayal. Joseph was the favorite son. He was the favorite son, and he got this robe of many colors. And he had this dream. And he told his brothers, he said, there's going to be a time that you're going to bow down to me. Seems the thing that I wouldn't tell my brother, as if they're already jealous of me and angry at me. But it wasn't well received as you could imagine. And next thing happened is they threw him into a pit. They threw him into this pit. And it says in Genesis 37:20, come now, let's kill him. Throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. And then we'll see what comes of his dreams. So we're seeing here, he was throwing it into this pit, probably thinking he was going to die. But as the story goes on, we see that he actually was just sold into slavery. That's all. He got sold and was led into Egypt. And still, a part of that circumstance that he was going through is an unfortunate situation, but God is sovereign. As we continue on, he's in Egypt. He gets a fresh start, and he's working for a man named Potiphar. And Potiphar trusts him. He trusts him because Joseph is a godly man. And Joseph is in order, working for Potiphar, and Potiphar has a wife. And Potiphar's wife then wants Joseph, because Joseph is a handsome man. And she says, lie with me. And multiple times Joseph says, no. And he runs out. He flees from the situation. Next thing you know, we see he has brought this Hebrew up to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. Potiphar's wife lies. And Joseph then ends up in prison. And so we see that his brothers are jealous of him. They throw him in a pit. He gets sold into slavery. He starts fresh. He starts new. And then he gets a false accusation and ends up in prison. But yet, although this circumstance was still happening, we still are seeing God's sovereignty. And that this detour didn't change who God was, did not change his sovereignty. And so he's in prison for 2 years. He's in prison. And I can imagine if I'm Joseph, I'm sitting there mad. I'm sitting there furious at my brothers. I mean, there's been times where I'm sure we've all been pranked, but this goes far and beyond a prank. I mean, I am frustrated, and that I'm sitting there and just, oh man, those stinkers. And so as time goes on, Joseph has this unique gift where he can interpret dreams. He interprets this dream for Pharaoh, the man in Egypt. He interprets this dream, and then he becomes Pharaoh's right-hand man and actually saves Egypt. He says, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. We see that in Genesis 41:41. So Joseph is now the second man in Egypt. And so we're like, oh yes, now we're getting somewhere. This story is getting good. Joseph's like, finally, something good is happening. But the whole time, Joseph was a godly man. And he still knew that God was sovereign. And so as that time that famine is happening, his brothers come around because his family's hurting. His brothers come and they go to ask for some help. As they're going to ask for help, Joseph realizes that that's his brothers, those are my brothers that threw me into the pit. His brothers didn't realize that. And so as you can imagine, Joseph was a little angry at first, a little upset. But instead of just showing wrath and punishing them or sending them to be killed, Joseph showed forgiveness. Joseph showed grace. And he says this, but God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, to save you lives by a great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. We see here that Joseph is reconciling with his brothers and realizing God's sovereignty. But this just wasn't a reconciliation with his brothers. It was a testament. It was a testament to who God really is. So throughout Joseph's entire story, his entire life, we're seeing things going up and down all around, but God was still orchestrating something amazing. We see you intended to harm me, but God intended to do it for good, to accomplish what is now being done here, saving the lives of many. And so we're seeing here that God was sovereign throughout the entire story. This is just a short little paraphrase of Joseph's life. But God was sovereign through that. And so there's two challenges I want us to take away from Joseph's story and how God is sovereign. Embrace the unknown with faith. Embrace the unknown with faith. Just like I've already been saying, the circumstances that Joseph went through, every single situation, every pit he faced, God had a bigger plan. God had something better for Joseph. And so whenever you find yourself in a time, in a detour, in a circumstance, let's not say, God, why? God, why am I going through this? Instead, let's say, God, what might you be doing through this for me? What might you be doing through this for me? Instead of saying why, let's say, God, even though I don't understand, I'm going to trust your ways. I'm going to trust your ways. In Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6, it's a popular verse, but it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge me, and he will make our path straight. And so what I like to do, and what I've told my kids in the youth group, is I say sometimes let's flip around the verse and let's put our pronouns in it. It says, I will trust in the Lord with all of my heart. And God, I will lean on you. I will lean all on your understanding, not my own. I'm going to submit to you, and you will make my paths straight. And so the question I want to ask you guys, and I got to ask myself sometimes, is are we willing to look past this, what we're in right now? Because it might be pain. It might be hurt. Whatever the circumstance that you're going through, can we look past this and trust God's eternal plan? Can you trust God more than your own sight? Can you trust God more than your own sight? And the second challenge I have is surrender the illusion of control. Surrender the illusion of control. Joseph's life highlights the human choices and God's divine plan. And often in our own life, we try to manage every single detail that we go through. But there are just some things that are out of our hands. But can you surrender that? Can you surrender? Can you guarantee that your loved ones will always be there when you reach out to them? You cannot. Can you control the global events that might impact your life directly, like an economic crash, wars, or a pandemic? You cannot. Can you guarantee that your aspirations and dreams that you have for your children will align with the paths they choose for themselves? You cannot. Can you determine the exact number of days you have left here on this earth? You cannot. You see, true freedom comes with surrendering. True freedom comes with surrendering. Letting go of our illusion that we have control. Letting go and finding joy and finding peace. Not rooted in circumstances, but in God's eternal plan. In Philippians 4:6-7, it says this: do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Are you willing to surrender your illusion that you have control? And the thing is, sometimes we hear surrender and we think it's wimpy. We think that, I can't. But the truth is, with surrendering, is that we're surrendering, we're leaning into a love that never fails once we surrender to God. And so I ask the question, who is in control? And so I ask you, are you here today uneasy? Are you here thinking, I've been trying to control my life for however many years? What is it that's holding you back from giving the steering wheel to God? Is it legacy concerns? Thinking, how am I going to be remembered when I die? Is it health and longevity, the anxiety that your health is declining? Is it the financial security that you're holding on to every single penny and every decision you make is just based on money? Is it family dynamics where you're wanting your choices to be dictated by the past of your family members, especially your children? Whatever it might be, let go. Let go. Surrender. Trust in God's sovereign hands. And you might be here today and there's a reason you're here. This was all part of his plan. And if you don't know God, let me tell you about him, because he is amazing. He made this world, and he wanted you, all of you. He wanted us, but we didn't want God. So we turned our back away from him, and we tried to do life on our own, but the world was so broken, and we were in need of a Savior. So all part of God's sovereign plan, he sends his son Jesus. He sends Jesus to come here, live a perfect life, never sinned, did miracles. And you would think that people would like that. But people actually hated him for it. They hated him for it. And they put him on a cross. And they attempted to kill him, and they succeeded. He died on that cross. But then he did something that no one has ever done, is he beat death. 3 days later, he beat it. And in his word, it says that if we turn away from our old lives, if we surrender and we give our all to him, if we're going this way, I turn around and I go follow Jesus, it says he will make us clean and we will be his. So that is our God. You know, there's a song and it says, same God. And it says, the God who was with Jacob, Moses, Mary, and David. The same God who opened up the oceans, blessed the lowly, made the shepherd boy courageous, is here for you now. He's here for you now. And so I want you to think of these lyrics for a second. So whatever you need to do, if it's closing your eyes, I want you to think about these lyrics right here. It says, you heard your children then, you hear your children now. You are the same God. You are the same God. And I want you to think about that for a moment. Your fears, your struggles, the doubts that you have, it's not too big for our God. Because our God is the same from the beginning to the end. The same God who did the miracles, the same God who demonstrated power, the same God that shows love, the same God that shows faithfulness is still with us today. And so whatever your struggles, your fears, your aspiration, he sees them. And he wants you to know that he's faithful. And he is with you today. Our circumstances, they might change. But our God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so whatever it is that you're holding on tight, that steering wheel, release. Give it to God. Rest in his unwavering sovereign hands. And remember, while we might make the choices, God writes the story. While we might make the choices, God writes the story.